This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with my eye doctor. Welcome to the show. What if dance, movement, and play held the keys to better relationships? Today's guest, Peter Anderson, spent 25 years as a professional dancer before becoming a relationship mentor, helping couples reconnect through the power of the nervous system, humor, and mindful communication. We talk about emotional safety, listening, nonviolent communication, and why true intimacy starts with self-awareness. Ladies, gentlemen, all you remarkable people, please welcome Peter to the show. Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's going to be a great conversation. I've been actually looking forward to talking to you about things for quite a while.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me as a guest. It's a great pleasure to be here.
And you have a phenomenal story. I've gotten a chance to read a little bit about you, to learn a little bit about you. I actually watched a TED Talk that you did in Iceland, which I thought was incredible. And so I think the audience is going to get to learn so much about your incredible journey, but also about what you're doing today. And so maybe since everybody hasn't had the opportunity to learn a little extra about you yet, why don't we start by having you introduce yourself and what it is that you do today?
Yeah, sure. I'm a relationship mentor at the moment. And what I do is I work with couples to help them find ways of communicating that they get an understanding of their nervous system, they get an understanding how humor works and play works in that relationship so they can turn towards each other and have a more healthy, playful relationship.
That's pretty incredible.
Yes, I think one of the things is what I find with some people is that they both individuals, they want to move towards each other and they can't sometimes understand what's gone on or why they can't find that spark again. And there are patterns that they're doing that they're not even conscious of that is taking them away from each other. So times to showing what those patterns are, they go, oh, I get it. So if I put some effort into shifting this, we can reconnect again.
Wow. And so, as you've kind of developed your thought process around this, have you found that that couples just really don't even know that they have started to drift apart, and it's not until they've got this large thing that they're dealing with, or are you meeting people who are really questioning where they are today?
Well, sometimes it's couples are saying, well, I have a wonderful relationship. I really love my partner. But there's just 10% that doesn't feel okay. And I find out when we start to talk about that 10%, it's actually maybe 10% on the top of the iceberg, but underneath that 10% is actually leading towards disaster. But because everything else is playful and it's fun, it's like there's not a real problem here. And there actually is, and there's actually a lot of resentment going on and bitterness, and that hasn't been brought onto the table for them to discuss, to go, okay, this is what I need in my life, and I may be compromising that need, and I'm suffering from it. And I'm just trying, and it doesn't make sense because this is the person I love, but at the same time, there's a part of me that isn't connecting to the person I love.
And so it's interesting to hear you talk about this because you've had some really interesting experiences in all sorts of things, including dance and improv. And so I would imagine that some of the things you've learned along the way have also given you some insights that make you somewhat extra qualified to spot some of these things and then be able to relay them back to the people you work with.
Yes, I think one thing that I think dance has, and I was 25 years in the dance industry, and I trained in ballet and contemporary dance, is that you're always in relationship physically when you're doing a dance, like a partnership or even in a group, and you're knowledge of your physical connection with somebody else, the intention behind movement becomes so nuanced and so delicate that you can sometimes read the body before your actual conscious mind knows what's going on. And there's almost, they're like that idea that we're scanning, our nervous system's constantly scanning the environment to see if it's safe. And when you start to understand people's postures and how they're moving, the energy they come into a room, starts to give you an awareness of how other people's physiology affects your own. So there are areas in there that I think are really help within relationship connection. And the improvisation, which for me was a wonderful, I first learned about it when I was about 16. And it's a common thing that's used in American and Canadian improvisation, and that's the yes and philosophy.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And I use that when I used to do business coaching for creative thinking for businesses. But also for relationships, I found out that people, when they think they're being funny, sometimes they're actually pulling each other down. Because if we look at our stand-up comedy compared to like our comedy improvisation, stand-up comedy tends to be decomposing or an event that makes you laugh at it because it's brought down to it's sometimes how silly it is, and you laugh at that aspect, which is a great form of comedy, and political comedy does very well in it, and looking at our behaviors as human beings, it can really get us laughing. But sometimes when it's used in a relationship, when you're trying to gain rapport with each other, it actually can become destructive. So the wonderful thing about comedy improvisation is it's about listening, and it's about supporting, it's about offering gifts and presents, and offering something that you think somebody would enjoy to have to play with, and instead of going, aha, you're like this, or aha, you're like that, and then and it's taking their energy away, it's actually giving you energy. And that can be the difference of a day, where at the end of the day you want to be more intimate, or at the end of the day you're like, I'm not quite sure if I'm like what's going on today.
Yeah. So then let's go backwards then and talk a little bit about this, because you mentioned thinking about improv at 16, but it begins a lot earlier than that, really, when you think about the dance portion and some of the reasons that you use dance as an outlet. So let's talk about that a little bit. How did you actually get into dance?
Right, yeah, we're going all the way back. So
yeah, because I find this fascinating. So
yeah, so my heritage is that I am English and Jamaican. And so dance with my family was just a part of growing up. 60s soul music like Otis Redding and Sam Cooke and all those, that was just played in the house. And so I watched my mum wasn't a great dancer, but my dad was a phenomenal dancer. And so I was just brought up with that way of expressing movement. And then in the early 80s, a little bit of magic happened in our culture, in American culture, and it kind of worked its way over to the UK, and that was hip hop. And I remember my sister came into the hallway and she goes, "Oh, I've just learned this thing. It's called breakdancing." And she showed me this one move that was like a helicopter move. And I was just like, right then, I was just taken by it. And I'm diagnosed vaguely. It's not a great diagnosis, but I'm diagnosed with ADD. And when I lock into something, that's it. I just go until I become a specialist in it. I just kind of, everything else disappears and I just lock in. And so I just loved breakdancing. And I love the culture around it. I love the sense of togetherness, the political side of it, the aspirational side of it, the idea that you can have conflict through movement that isn't actually causing anybody any pain, but still having that buzz behind it.
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, and for me, hip hop at that time was like the arts I found later on in life. Because you had the graffiti, which was, I became a painter later on in life. I exhibited painters in exhibitions, or abstract oil paintings. The movement, the dancing. I remember sitting at the back of the car and going, if I could only do this for the rest of my life. And I think I was probably about 16. Little did I know, I was probably younger actually, little did I know that I was going to do it for the rest of my life. And that I can't live my life without movement. And so, and what else was there? And the music, and I don't really resonate when it went to when hip hop went to a gangster type vibe. It just didn't resonate with what was going on within inside me. And so, but at that time, in the 80s, the worst thing you're going to say is that somebody's hat looked silly. But that was about as far as it went. So it was the creative sphere of artistry that I loved within hip-hop. And I carried that on into my adulthood to become a professional artist and performer. And then what happened is I was breakdancing once, and I had a friend, and he said, he was a young film star, and he was in the arts, and he said, do you want to come and breakdance for our dance show? I was like, yeah, sure. And I got there, and I was sitting there watching while they were doing this dance class, and I was like, that looks easy. And the woman was like, right, you're coming in. I was like, what? And you're not watching, you're dancing. I was like, okay. So I started dancing, and it just came quite naturally to me. And I remember I was doing a workshop at the Royal Ballet in Covent Garden, and I was in my breakdance kit. I was at the ballet bar. I had no idea what was going on. And then this guy said, we're going to do a tour en l'air. I said, I have no idea what that is. He said, you're going to jump up in the air, you're going to go twice, and you're going to come down. I said, that's not a problem. So I went and down. And he was like, that's you just did a tour en l'air. I was like, oh, did I? And so it just happened naturally. And I did a foundation course in London, which was there was a lot of troubled youth people that were finding dance to express themselves. And then from there, I went to a dance school called Rambert, which is one of the top schools in the UK. And then I went off to Europe and then danced in Europe. So I ended up, that wish in that car led to a career.
It became your reality.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so interesting for me because as a person who probably falls more on your mom's side than your dad's side when it comes to dancing, there's a lot. It's always amazing to me when I watch people, whether it's in ballet or it's hip hop or it's breakdancing, like the coordination and the thought process that people must go through physically and mentally to be able to perform is pretty amazing. But your point around being able to create tension in movement without harm to anyone else is really interesting because as I think back and look back, you see that all the time. And so there are these competitions that I sometimes see as I scroll through social media, and where there are people who are trained dancers who meet a partner for the very first time. They have to improv a dance, and they do all of this phenomenal dancing, but it's the tension between them that really draws you in. And now that I'm seeing that in my mind, it really does connect to the work that you're doing today. And so it's kind of interesting to me how those things kind of wrap together that way.
Yes, I think I do salsa dancing now because I can't not dance. And it's very interesting. You just hold somebody's hand before they even start. In the first 2 seconds, you can get a sense of what the rhythm's going to be like.
Mm.
If they're going to follow, if they're going to lead, even if they're a follower, if it's going to be you dance softly, if they want to come closer, if they need more space, in a few seconds you can get a sense of what that person needs to dance with them, so that you can have an enjoyable dance together. So you don't push your intention on top of somebody else. You go, okay, this is the soul that I'm dancing with. This is what it needs. And you feel it, and then you work with it. So it gives you that sensitivity to somebody's physicality, as well as a lot of our society is very much about the cognitive understanding of somebody and how we read them and what they're saying and listening to words and did they mean that? And it can get so busy in the head. And sometimes when we let go of this thought process and get into our heart and the rhythm within our heart and our physicality, we have a different language that we can share with each other.
And that's an interesting thought when it comes to relationships, because there are parts of the relationship that are learned responses, things that kind of, if it were a dance, things that you do because your partner is going to do X, you do Y.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we are always aware that those are not always locked responses, that they could be something a little different. And I would imagine having that intuition and that sensitivity that you described from the salsa dancing is one of those things that translates into things that you could think about when tending to a relationship.
Yes, and it's like when somebody walks in the door, they're not always the same person that comes through that door. So if you think of somebody, you've got an idea of who your partner is, and they walk through the door, and you expect a certain energy, and that day they're not that person, and you just go into a routine way of approaching them, it can really be offsetting. But when they walk through the door, and you go, okay, who do I have today? Who has just walked through that door today? And how, a little bit like when you hold the hands of the dancer, what energy am I dealing with that? Who is it coming? Is it just, oh yeah, how's your day, blah, blah? Or is it like, oh no, they need to sit and talk? Do they need to be left alone? What is the energy that they're coming through? And when we start to read that, it just means that we're not bulldozing sometimes into other people's spaces.
And so you also mentioned that you have a soft diagnosis for ADD. Attention deficit disorder, or ADHD. In some regards, that can be, people can interpret that as problematic, meaning there's a lack of focus. It's very difficult to commit to something and be able to complete that task. But it can also be a superpower, right? It means that you can latch on to something and it become the focus. And when you think about how you've gone through your journey, the dance being a big part of the journey. Do you think that it's been beneficial to have maybe a little bit of attention deficit, or has it caused more problems than it's been beneficial for you?
I've never seen it as a problem. So it seems like the neuronormals see it as a problem. In the dance industry, most of us are considered ADHD or ADD. It's actually what you need to be a performer and that lifestyle.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I go more into the philosophy, and I read an article not so long ago, which I think was very interesting, that our society, they believe, through, it's a bit vague, I just skim through it, but they are different types of personalities for our evolution. So there are the type that manage the culture or the society that you're in. And there's the others that move and look forward for new places to harvest, to see what other lands are needed for future development. So if you're a person that stays within your tribe, that you will then, if you run out of resources and you don't have the people that go out and start looking for new lands and are adventurous and can't stay still, when the resources go, you're in trouble. But if they've already gone out and they found something, they can go, oh, we've got this, let's move here. and then they form the society again. And there was an argument that ADHD isn't actually a disability. It's actually part of our evolution of different personalities that make us. But we've now become so comfortable that the people who manage society, they rule it, and we're not really looking anywhere apart from if we go to Mars or somewhere else. We don't have that need as much now. So now we get drugged, and we get sat in chairs in schools, and we're told to stay part of the status quo. But in thousands of years ago, we were the ones that went forward. So I've never seen it as an issue, apart from I just got to be aware that I do include the people around me if I get locked into something, that I don't like, oh, there is a life in this universe that I need to be involved in. But at the same time, I've had such an amazing experience in life because of it.
Yeah.
So because of it, I've worked with great artists around the world. I've done amazing performances in different countries. I got my MA, even though I'm dyslexic. Just that pushing through. I was a black belt in martial arts. It's just this. I like the painting. I found I got a gift in it. I just painted, and suddenly I was doing exhibitions and I was selling. So it was just this,
which is incredible.
But I can't watch TV. So tell me to sit down and watch TV, and you're basically shooting me. Oh, I'm going to watch a program where everybody laughs, and it's really bad, and I'm just going to sit there and watch it. I'm just like, oh, you're killing my brain. Or social media, scroll. I mean, shoot me. It's so I can't handle the entertainment that we're giving, but I'm very happy to make the entertainment.
That's pretty amazing. You know, and the dyslexia piece, I also, when you moved to Iceland, you moved there and you did not know the language, right? And so you had to learn the language. And
I didn't really learn it very well.
Well, it's a difficult language to learn because it's a dramatic language. It's still using a lot of the words that would have been related to the older forms of English and German, but we don't use those types of word roots anymore. No. So it sounds different. It's very difficult.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. But you actually got involved in and trying to learn and teach some of it at some point, right?
Yeah, this was the weird thing, is I didn't learn Icelandic very well at all. But I have a great passion about the education system, that it is missing something in its structure. And in language, I felt that language was more of an art than it is a constructed science. And so for some people like myself, the way it's taught, I will never learn a language the way it's taught because of the way I learn. And it's just painful. It was painful learning French. It was being painful learning German. It was painful learning Icelandic. And I went about, because I was a dance teacher, I used to teach boys who'd never danced before. I'd get them into dance. I'd go into schools, and I did like the outreach work for the dance company at some point. And so I'd go into schools and I'd say, do you want to do my dance workshop? And they would show me the finger, and like, there's no way I'm doing that. And then I explained to them what I was going to do for them, why I was going to do it, and that anyone can leave when they wanted to leave, and it wasn't going to be easy. And they all actually are very good at it. They just don't know because they've never been told. They're not, as a boy, you haven't been allowed to do it. So I would take them, in 3 days, I'd get them to perform in front of their school, and they would blow the school away.
3 days?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I had a reputation of doing this at this time. And I was getting so frustrated, and I've almost got post-traumatic stress from education in certain things. And I remember I was in a learning test in Icelandic, and I froze, and I was like, I couldn't move, and then I left, and I was like I started crying, and I was just like, what is going on here? And an army friend told me, I think you've got post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was like, what do you mean? What? I've never had any dramatic thing happen to me. He goes, no, it's about you can't escape a situation. You can't run and you can't fight, and the system shuts down on itself. And that was the education system for me. So I decided that I was going to shift this, and I created a learning pattern where I used movement to learn the words of the language. So I didn't actually know the language, but I had a structure. So people would come to the class, and I would help them learn the language by them using movement for the structure. So I was almost like the facilitator of the language, but I couldn't speak it myself. And it was the weirdest, and people used to joke. They go, oh yeah, you'd have heard that Peter's teaching Icelandic in the university, and everyone would be like, what? Oh, I remember at a dinner table, and they're going, shaming me for not learning. You've been here for so long, and you can't speak Icelandic. And then my friend goes, yeah, but he teaches it at the university. And they're like, what? That doesn't make sense. So it's always a bit of a joke.
Well, but that is so interesting to think about it in those terms, because I think there's a traditional learning model that we're all very familiar with, that includes giving you something, and you are supposed to either memorize that thing, or you're supposed to memorize and then use that thing you memorized in some practical sense for the purpose of testing.
Yeah.
And everybody doesn't learn the same. So if you happen to be one of those people who is really good at remembering things, then any memory recall test you're going to do great on.
Yeah.
If you've got to apply something you memorized, you may not be quite as good as that. So you may know all the facts, but not be able to do practical application.
Yeah.
And the education system is really kind of built around those principles. So to be able to bring in something different, you not only can you make it easier for yourself, but there are lots of people who probably fell into a similar boat that were now able to learn in a way that was more practical for them. And I think that's one of the things that we are learning more and more about as time goes on. And you see classrooms starting to look different, and classrooms starting to address different learning styles, because we are starting to realize that people need to see things and do things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember there was a test I saw of people talking about there's no such thing as a visual learning style, that it's a collective style that you just take different moments. They said, we've tested this empirically on how it works. And they brought up these pictures, and they said people don't memorize these pictures, and they're like black and white pictures. I was just like, you don't understand visual memory. You're like a PhD, blah, blah, blah. And you've got these black and white that have no emotional, it doesn't draw you into that's not a visual. Just because it's a picture, doesn't mean you've got you're not emotionally pulled into it, that your mind wants to have excitement and pulling that image back again.
Yeah.
So there's no emotional connection to that image. So they do this huge research on something fundamentally that is missing the understanding of what it means to be emotionally connected to a visual image. So I also have a frustration sometimes that we are moving forward in many aspects, but then I also look at education. I think it's not so much different than the 70s.
Yeah.
And we've got this technology that is phenomenal. And we could change our learning system today, right now. We could make it individual learning for each person in that class to know what their learning style is, build on it, and they could all come out at the height of their potential. But because of education tradition, we haven't, nobody wants to invest that money because they don't get a quick return on it. it's I know it's going to happen, but it could happen right now. But we're
Yeah.
still doing the same school structure, and while businesses and everyone is taking this technology and they're flying,
Yeah.
but the education
Yeah.
is like, what do you mean? Okay, so if you're going to do research, you can't use AI. What do you mean you can't use AI? It's like
Yeah.
we have to learn
It's
how to use it.
well, and I think you're right. I mean, but it does take time, and it takes unfortunately a very long time
Mm,
to understand how to incorporate what is today's technology into tomorrow's life,
yeah,
right? So we're seemingly always behind where technology sits from perspective of education, as an example.
yeah,
And you can remember, like I can, when there was really no internet for doing research
yeah,
for things for school, and you had other things, right?
yeah.
You had microfiche, if anybody remembers what that is. You had LexisNexis. You could do these types
Mm,
of things. You had encyclopedias, but
yes,
it took a long time for the educational system to match up with what was available for you to be able to do research more quickly and
yeah,
be able to develop and write things.
yeah,
And so I do think that we're moving in the right direction. We're learning that AI is not maybe the enemy. We need to learn how to use it
yes,
effectively.
yeah,
But to your point, it's not going to be today, and it's probably not going to be tomorrow,
yeah.
and it's going to take us a while to get there.
And this is where I think is a bit sad because and it's just because it's an emotional thing for me, I suppose. It's like in schools, like I was brought up with encyclopedias.
Hmm.
Like the thing in the house, if we didn't know anything, we had to go to the encyclopedia and we had to look it up and we had to find out what it was. I wasn't very good at that because of dyslexia. I never always knew what a word started with, well, a letter of a word
Oh,
started with.
yeah.
So dictionaries, the library, the encyclopedia were a struggle for me. Although in my house, it was the way that we were always encouraged to get information. And then the internet came and Google came. And when Google came, my life changed because I no longer had to do ABC to find information. It worked the speed that my mind liked to work. So I'd have an
Hmm.
idea and it was like, bang, copy paste, bang. And I was like, I can work within what goes on within my mind. I've got a system that can match how I think. And that's when I
Mm.
decided to go back to further education. I was like, now I will not be stuck in the system. And I remember I had to untangle some of my own trauma because I was like a C student if I was lucky at school academically. But my brain didn't feel like a C student. I could never figure that out. How my brain doesn't feel like a C student, but my mark is a C student.
Mm.
But then I started getting A's when I was at MA level, and I was like, at first I found it really hard. I was like, are they playing with me? Are they like giving me an A so they think I'm an A and then I'll become an A? And then I talked to my tutor and goes, no, we have external markers and we are Exeter University and we have a reputation to uphold. We will not be giving you an A unless you deserve it. And I found that really hard to get in my head. But then I realized that the education at my home was already in an MA, PhD type environment.
Hmm.
But in school, because it, like you said, memory learning, which I don't
Yeah.
have that, I was stupid. And I had that contradiction going on. At home, I was having intelligent conversations. And at school, I was considered stupid. And then because of technology, I was able to then match how I
Ah,
felt in my
yeah.
mind and I could fly. Now with I get AI. Unfortunately, people just lie back and go, "Oh, do it for me." I'm like,
Right.
that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
It's like your
That's exactly
research
right.
partner. It's like you've got these ideas. Go out and get me this information. I'll put it together, and I'll create it. You go and do you're the director of the information.
Yeah.
And if you become the director of the information, you can make incredible things.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
but unfortunately, people might just go, "Oh, write me an essay." Blah, blah, blah. Oh, there it goes. And if we get into that, then we're in trouble. But if we go, be my assistant, I've got these ideas, I need to get them out, go and find me and bring it back, and then get me all the research out there and show me how much percentage this is considered more likely to be a correct scenario, then you've got a huge tool in your hands.
Agreed. And I think that's where we have both the opportunity and we fight the delay. And because human nature, particularly with people who are young and inexperienced, would be to let it do the thing for you. And so developing a way to teach people to harness the power of AI without relying on the power of AI is, I think, what's going to be very difficult for us. And, it's when we think about what you went through relative to your learning, I mean, I think it put you on a path to maybe prove a little bit about your ability to do things outside of what would be the traditional classroom. And so the involvement in dance certainly was part of that. Teaching Icelandic without learning Icelandic, kind of part of that. But how did you go from dance to higher education to now helping individuals and couples learn more about themselves and broaden their relationships?
Yeah. Well, along this pathway, I was very happy in the theatre, in expressing creativity. And I had overcome quite a few things like the educational side. And so there was a real sense of, and I had great friends and I felt that I had decent respect and it was, but in my intimate relationships, I didn't have that same vibration. I felt unsafe emotionally in my home. I could never say that openly, even acknowledge it to myself. I don't know if that's stereotypical condition of being male, but to say that I was afraid emotionally. I didn't understand myself emotionally, what I needed, how I needed to be loved, to even take that as not a compromise. This is how I need to be loved within myself. So I was very attracted to attractive ladies, intelligent, exciting, but emotionally I didn't feel safe in those relationships. And I'm very committed, so I stay in those relationships. I don't like leaving a relationship. So the mother of my first two girls, we were together for about 17 years, and then it just was not working. And so I started to, was like, it doesn't make sense. I don't want other partners. I just want to have a family and I want to be with one person. And how comes it didn't work? How comes I didn't have what it needed for me to, one of my biggest desires, I was unable to get. Yeah. And at that time, I may have put a lot of blame on the other person. They're like this, they do this, that's why I can't. And then I went into another one, very different culture, looked very different, but the same pattern. And then I was like, I've done it again. So I have the problem. So something in me needs to unlearn something. And it was very hard for me to first acknowledge that something's seriously not okay. Because the picture I had of myself was I was a nice guy that tried to do his best, that's committed to relationships, all the things that I thought that you had to do to have a stable relationship. and it wasn't working. And it turned out that me being a nice guy was actually part of the problem. And I didn't realize that either. So the idea that I wanted somebody else to feel good, so I wouldn't acknowledge my own feelings in the situation, and then little drips of resentment would come in, and I wouldn't face them, and then they turned into something sour. Where if I had gone, no, this is not okay, this is my values, or this is what I need in my life, and I need to express this. How does that feel to you? What's that? And get it out there, have the courage to put it on the table, to be vulnerable, to have the strength to be vulnerable and say, this is what is important to me, and be able to handle the pushback with kindness, not pushing back with the same energy, but to hold it with compassion and go, this is important to me in this relationship. And anything that's important to you, I want you to put it on the table as well. But it can't be compromised. It needs to be discussed. And so I had to get courage to be vulnerable. And so I went on a journey because I had achieved these other things externally, but I didn't understand this. And so I put myself into codependency for 2 years. So it's like what's it called? Alcohol Anonymous. It's the for anyone who doesn't know, it's the opposite side of that. It's the person that is normally on the other side of the alcoholic. So they're the ones that support, and maybe their behaviors actually support their behaviors, and so it's somebody who gives too much without actually looking at what's important to them.
I see.
So I was sitting right in those circles where people go, oh, what's your name? And I'm like, oh, thank you. I thought, this is weird. But I started to learn how to say my emotions out loud. And that was huge, without anyone judging it, just listening. And then I was like, hold up a second. In comedy improvisation, it's all about listening. And in this, where I'm healing, it's about listening. And in dance, when you're improvising, it's about listening. And what happens when you listen? Your nervous system feels different. And when you listen to something, when you felt listened to, when you felt heard, you feel seen. And one of the things that I felt is I didn't feel seen in my relationship. Deep down. So I was like, hold up a second, there's something that's going on here about listening, being seen and being heard, and the healing that comes from that. So I think one of the next major things that I came across was mindfulness. So the more I started to listen to myself, the more inside I started to hear my own negative talk. And if I was to take everything that I said to myself and say that to another human being, I would probably be arrested.
Wow.
It was horrendous. So I'm like, if I can't love myself, if I can't be compassionate to the different parts within myself, how can I attract a relationship into my life that is going to echo what I say to myself? So if I'm saying I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, there's a high chance that that person that I'm attracted to is going to give me exactly what I say to myself.
Yeah.
So I started making notes on everything I said to myself, every day, every moment. And again, the ADD comes in. So I go,
locked in.
Yeah, I'm locked in. I'm like, I'm doing this. I want this, and I'm doing it. So I get that, and I start to study mindfulness, and I start to become aware of my emotional state and how I'm feeling, and the days, and the sounds, and being present. And I go, and it's hard because I'm looking into shadows within myself that I didn't even know were there, and they are scary. And And the more I look at them, the more I see them, then they start to expand, they start to disappear. Without doing anything, they just start to go. And so I started to feel better within myself. And then the next thing that did it for me is I did a course in nonviolent communication. So I studied that. And I didn't like conflict. And so in a relationship, when there was any conflict going on there, I would do my best to avoid it and just hope that it just brushes over and that we can get back to the nice bit, because I just didn't like this tension. And it taught me how to not avoid conflict with kindness. So I had to again get the courage, because there's a younger part of me that just was like to hide away. And I was like, okay, you can hide away. The older part of me is now going to start to look after you now. You don't need to run this. You don't need to run the show anymore. I'll be dealing, and I'll show you that it's going to be okay. This is not just me saying it verbally. I will do it, and I'll show you that's okay, so you don't have to be afraid anymore inside yourself. So I start to figure out how I need to be loved, and then communicate it in a way that isn't creating any kind of verbal violence to somebody else. So I'm not judging anyone, I'm not blaming anyone, I'm not generalizing, I'm not using comparisons, I'm not doing anything in this language which I wasn't aware of before that would raise somebody else's defense mechanism. So that means that I can start to talk for my vulnerable side from a place of empowerment and kindness. So the kindness becomes a force of protection, not for me, but for the other person as well. So we both come to a place where we feel at a good vibration at the end of the conversation, and that it's okay for it not to be okay, and go on the journey of repair. And how you go on that journey of repair to get back, that you don't, before I might have just like left the house, I've just got, oh, this is too, I can't handle this anymore, I just need to get out and I just need to cool off because I can't handle it. But now I can go, okay, I can feel the vibration because of mindfulness inside myself, and it's like, I don't need to be scared of this feeling, it's just my nervous system reacting. I don't just, when I wasn't aware, I'd run. But now it's like, okay, this is on.
Yeah.
I see what's going on. I'm now going to, what is in me that is not being said, that needs to be said? And how am I going to communicate that in a way that is kind and loving? So, and then for some reason I was like, I wasn't going to do relationships anymore. I was going to bring my kids up, and I wasn't going to do relationships. I was like, I've been given lots of gifts in this life, and relationships is one of those gifts that I was just not given.
It's just not yours. Yeah.
And that's fine. That's what I said to myself. It wasn't fine, but that's what I said to I wasn't going to get the happily ever after. And for people who do get it, that's wonderful. Congratulations. But for me, it's just not my story. And then this lady comes into my life, and I am terrified. And I'm like, I'm not getting involved in a relationship. I'm just not going to get in. I'm just going to be this isolated monk in my home, and I will study and I will learn and I'll look after my kids, and my life will be perfect. And because of COVID, we couldn't actually get physically close to each other, which was perfect, because then all I did is I dated, and I got to know her.
Yeah.
And I got to know who she was, and did my nervous system feel safe within her environment. So I did a very old-fashioned way of dating. So we couldn't hold hands because of the COVID rules. So we would go for walks in the woods, and we would just talk and get to know each other without actually when you can get lost in physical contact, you can get crazy.
Sure.
But and so it was a very slow process. And it turned out that it was finally a safe relationship that could, and it had the adventure as well, and it had everything else that I liked from the other relationships, but I had this this sense of it's okay. And I'd never had that before. So, and there's another pathway that I haven't discussed, and that was the healing pathway that I've been on. But I can, if we got time, I can link that in where that came to. But that's where, just to answer a long version of why I was answering that question, is that's how it turned from that sense of lack of safety to safety, because I had to shift within myself, and then I attracted that person into my life.
And so listening to that, I feel like you've made a couple of points that maybe we'll pull on just a little bit. The nervous system reaction piece, I think, is very important, and I don't know that it's one of those things that people think about all that much. And so, you talked a little bit about post-traumatic stress, and but that same type of emotional and physical response can be linked to the way that you feel, not just in those situations like taking the test, but maybe in situations where there's confrontation at home, or there's something that happens that maybe you or your partner does that reminds you of this instance, and then you have that type of response. And so in the work that you do today, how important is it to understand the physical and emotional response to what we will label as some past relationship trauma? And do you work with people to help them both see that and understand how to deal with it, like you did in learning to look inside?
Yes. The one that, well, there's a few, I'll try and keep it short because I know I can get a little bit locked in, right? ADD kicks off and I'm off. So I studied Thai massage in Thailand, and I studied that for a while. And I worked in spas and stuff, so I had a lot of experience in that area. I studied NLP and timeline therapy, and that gave me an understanding of a little bit into how things work in that area. I also am a craniosacral therapist as well, so I learnt the cranial rhythm within the nervous system and how it affects the fascia within the body. And so and that's why I said I hadn't really gone through my healing line. I just kind of summarize it quickly. But the thing that really made sense to me was the polyvagal theory. Stephen Porges's look at the vagus nerve and how it splits off into the ventral vagus nerve and the dorsal vagus nerve, and how the heart rate variation of heart rate
variability.
Thank you, and how that affects the coherence within the system. So for me, what was really interesting about his work was the co-regulation, that the ventral nervous system is working to see how we come together, and the vagus nerve, the tone of the vagus nerve holds together the sympathetic system that is on activity, and when it becomes weaker, then it drops down and then starts to eventually goes down to the dorsal kind of shutdown stage. For me, that made complete sense with everything, because it tied into the idea of, in a relationship when I felt numb, I was probably down in a dorsal vagus nervous. When I was sympathetic fight and flight, I was desperately holding on to this ventral vagus nerve, trying to hold things together, trying to get back to that safety area, and sometimes getting back there. And then when you do something like improvisation, or you're playing with each other, you're in that wonderful mobilization. Like the sympathetic is kicking off to give you a bit of excitement. The ventral vagus is holding the space. So you get that lovely activity. So you've got that social connection with a bit of fire in there as well. Mm-hmm. And that is what I think also makes an intimate relationship very connecting, when you have the spark. So it's just not safe, because if it's just safe, you could just go to sleep. Or you want to have a little bit of edginess into there. And so understanding that this part of the brainstem is always active, and there isn't a language to that part of the brainstem. So we're so focused on the frontal part of our brain, how we intellectualize and how we reason, but there's a system that is just active, that doesn't care about reason and it should be okay, or it is going to activate no matter what. So you either get to know it and create space and that it needs, or you ignore it and you try to use reason and you should be doing this and you should be doing it. It doesn't make sense why this is. I shouldn't be scared or I should be happy. You're not. Yeah. Because there's another part of you that is activating. And when you get to know it, it can really help in the whole process of the relationship.
And so to that end, you have been helping couples, but you've written a book because
yes,
which is a way to actually get access to you, considering not everybody can come and see you.
Yes,
so
yes.
Tell me about the book.
Yes, so the book came from, I was working with some clients and I'd mixed, because I had been doing coaching for about 15 years. And I was doing more of an NLP timeline therapy type coaching and MVC. And it was getting decent results and everything was good. But I'm doing somebody else's. That's what I've learned. Is what I've been got my stamp in. And then I was working with this couple where I started to bring in the improvisation. I started to bring in the movement. I started to do other things. And I was like, "Ooh, this feels good." And because I always felt that it was splintered. It's like there's the performer, and then there's the healer, and then there's the intellect. And
I see.
And then suddenly I brought them all together. And I remember she looked at me and she said, "You have to write this into a book so people have access to it." And I was like, "I don't know if I want to write a book." She goes, "Write the book." And then I clicked in. And then I was like, off, boom. And I just go like, oh, I see. That's why that's happening. This is here. This is what I'm working here. And that's how the book came about. So I've just recently put it all together as a framework that I work within.
And if people are really interested now, because we've kind of maybe teased some of this information, right? So we've talked about emotion and the process that people go through largely unknowingly. And we've talked about being able to be better at verbalizing those things, but being able to convey that in a kind, loving manner rather than the explosive type manner that can happen and be counterproductive. We know we have the book. But if people are interested in learning more about you and what you do and would like to get in touch, how do they do that?
Yeah, they go to my website, which is theplayfulcouple.co.uk. They can just contact me through there. And I also give free consultations so they can see, because it's not for everyone, but for some people, it's definitely what's missing for them as well. So we can have a little chat to see if what I have to offer would make a difference in their life. And I'm very much to the philosophy that if you're working with somebody that's going to guide you or facilitate a shift, that you've got to feel a connection with that human being.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel it, don't do it. It has to be authentic, and it has to really, for you to go on the journey with that person, it's more the person than the technique. Don't go with somebody. And that's why I do the consultation first, just to see, are we a fit? Do we work together? Can I offer you what you need?
Then I am going to put all the links in the description.
Wonderful.
So that people who are out doing things and listening can come back and click instead of having to scramble to write things down.
Yeah.
But this has been really cool for me. It's so interesting to have a conversation with someone who has such an artistic side. largely the types of things that my brain does not do very well, but also such an intellectual side, which is where I tend to focus. And so this is really cool for me to see the two together. So again, thank you so much for spending the time. You've taught me a lot, and I'm actually looking forward to learning a little bit more from you.
Oh, thank you so much. I thank you for giving the space and the questions and also allowing me to go on this journey. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
It was great to have you. If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show because we're working really hard to bring you great content, and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.